Yeah, that's right. Citizen journalism.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kugelman, for talking to me. First, I would like to get your comment on what is happening in South Asia between India and Pakistan. Given the evolving security situation, what do you know?
I mean, I'm very concerned. I mean, as you well know, India and Pakistan have had their share of crises. They fought several wars. They're no strangers to serious tensions. But what I worry about in this case is that what happened, the attack that happened in Kashmir last Tuesday, was particularly unusual and egregious. And I think that this has generated a particular type of emotion, including anger, in India, which I think raises the likelihood of some type of response that could be military in nature. And of course, as you know, the other issue is that India appears to have assumed that Pakistan played some role in this, even though it has not yet provided any evidence to suggest that, which I think is one reason why there's so much anger in Islamabad. So, I hope the cooler heads will prevail. It would be nice if there were some external mediation, including from the United States. But if we believe what President Trump said the other day, he said that eventually India and Pakistan will just figure it out themselves.
Given your study on Pakistan, India, South Asia, what do you think that is Pakistani state actively involved? You know, supporting these kinds of freedom fighters or militants in the occupied territories. I mean, is it happening?
Well, I mean,
Because we have seen a policy shift, like in during the last government as well, and even before that, as this realization that this is not helping, right?
right.
So, do you think that the state is still somewhere going with the policy supporting these people?
Well, I mean, the history is unavoidable. I mean, we know that in the past, Pakistan has provided sponsorship to these militants that fight in Kashmir. And this is one reason why India would assume that in this case, Pakistan, there must have been a Pakistan hand. But I mean, one thing that's very clear is that in recent years, there's been an emergence of indigenous militancy, and someone in Pakistan would call this, freedom fighters or whatever the case may be. So, I think it's one has to look at this with nuance. And I think when you have something that's so difficult to think about and so complex and controversial, there's a tendency to become very black and white thinking. You think, oh, it must have been Pakistan, or no, it could not have been Pakistan. But sometimes there's, these thin lines where you can't really know exactly what's going on. So short answer to it is that, yeah, there is a legacy of Pakistan providing support to these groups, but at the same time, we have seen many cases where, these groups exert plenty of agency on their own. They draw on local resources, local sentiment, and so on to do things without any type of external support.
Do you think that Pakistan had a reason, a plausible, credible reason in supporting these groups, in support of, in defense of Pakistan? And again, how do you think the Indian policy of revoking the Article 370 and the settler colonial, the policies that they're trying to bring in Hindus from other parts of the country, how do you think those steps of the Indian government have affected or, contributed to this attack, this emergence of this TRF?
Well, I mean, I think to the first part of your question, historically, in my view, one of the reasons why Pakistan would sponsor these groups that would operate in Kashmir was really an asymmetric tactic, in the sense that for many years, India's conventional military forces were stronger than Pakistan's. And I think that the view in Pakistan is you need to find ways to be able to counter that, try to reach parity or counter that Indian conventional military superiority, and one way to do so was to arm, to back these non-state actors. Coming to the current situation, we don't know very much about this resistance front. I mean, it is a new group. It emerged in more recent years. Certainly, I mean, I think one could argue that the revocation of Article 370 is always an issue that we should keep in mind when we're talking about drivers' motivations for acts such as what we saw last Tuesday. But my sense is that, the motivations for whoever committed this attack last week are very different. Now, of course, it's hard to ascribe motivations when you don't know exactly who did it. But I think that whoever did this wanted to essentially, A, puncture the Indian narrative that normalcy has been restored in Kashmir, and two, um, tried to damage the tourism industry, which is really important. I mean, tourism revenue is critical for the economy in the region. So that suggests whoever did this clearly wanted to undermine Indian legitimacy and undermine Indian rule and control of India administered Kashmir.
Pakistan Pakistan has said that if India stops waters, or if it releases the water, or if holds the, it suspends the Indus Water Treaty, Pakistan will consider it as an act of war. Under international law, can Pakistan do that?
Well, I'm not an expert in international law, so I shouldn't say, but I mean, it is very clear that this is a bilateral treaty that was mediated by and I believe co-signed by the World Bank. So it really is an international treaty. It's not just a bilateral treaty between India and Pakistan. So I think that it would be illegal for India to abrogate the treaty. It has not abrogated the treaty. It's held it in abeyance, which means it temporarily suspended it, subject to Pakistan ending its support for cross-border terrorism. So I don't necessarily think that either India or India in terms of what it did and Pakistan in terms of its reaction has violated international law. But I do think that one could certainly argue that this is one of the great success stories for transboundary water management in terms of a treaty that actually worked. And for it to be suspended for the first time, I think is very concerning. And I think that Pakistan does have reason to be concerned over the long term about the implications this could have for its water security. But to liken this to an act of war, well, again, I mean, if you cut off water from going into Pakistan, absolutely. I mean, that's a case of that's weaponizing water. But this is not something that can happen right away. India would have to build dams, and that could take a long time. These things don't happen overnight. So I think that the whole act of war thing, that rhetoric is just part of the tough talk that we're hearing now on both sides.
Do you think India and Pakistan are going to war, sometime in the near future?
Well, I certainly hope not. I've gotten that question a lot the last few days, and I keep saying I hope not. Honestly, I think that it's much more likely we'll see something similar to what we did in 2019, some type of limited military action from India. And if that happens, if there's an Indian military action on Pakistani soil, Pakistan will not do nothing. It would, I'm quite sure, retaliate. But I don't know if things would get beyond that. I just don't think either side, India, Pakistan, they can't afford a war. They can't afford a conflict. And Narendra Modi likes to project himself as the peaceful leader who keeps saying that this is not an era of war and all of that. So it would be the wrong optics, so to speak, the wrong image for him to start, fighting an extended war with Pakistan. I certainly hope that things don't escalate to the point where we have to worry about a war. But I do think that if things were to escalate, where you have an Indian military action, a Pakistani response, at that point there likely would be mediation, maybe not from the U.S., but perhaps from the Saudis or the Qataris, to help ensure that you don't have a full-fledged war.
Thank you, Mr. Kugelman, for talking to me.
Thank you.